Hi, I'm Ibrahim Hamide, and it is my birthday today.
Well, happy
Mhm.
birthday.
So I'm here on St. Paddy's Day. I'm an Irish Palestinian. It is true, it's my birthday. I wasn't joking.
I appreciate that. Could you briefly define and discuss the 5 pillars of Islam?
Sure. Islam basically stands on those pillars. Those are the most important functions of Islam. And of course, the oneness of God is the top one, witnessing that there's only one God and witnessing that Muhammad is his messenger. That's the first one. Then the second one is prayer. And prayer is a 5 times a day practice. Of course, it has rules and regulations, and it varies from the dawn prayer, the noon, the afternoon, the dusk, and the evening prayer. They vary in size, duration, length. Of course, you have to wash up. Ablution is, I guess, what the word for it is, before prayers, and you face east towards Mecca, and so that's prayers roughly, in a quick summation. After that, there's Ramadan. Ramadan is an Islamic calendar month, but its significance is that the Quran was first revealed to the Prophet Muhammad during Ramadan, but the greater significance of it is that there's a fasting duty for each Muslim that is able, physically able, to fast. And the fast consists of no food, no water, no sexual relations between sunrise and sunset for roughly a month. Since it's on the lunar calendar, it could be 29 days, it could be 30, it could be 31, but it varies within a day or two max. Of course, there's more to it than just fasting. It's also a month of worship and then a month of, when breaking the fast, to bring somebody home that is unable to feed themselves, to share the breaking of the fast with you, and much more. But that's the third pillar of Islam. The fourth is called zakah. Zakat is the giving of 2.5% of one's wealth or assets to the poor, and that's on annual basis, so it's done every year. Those that don't have, of course, do not give, and giving again is regulated by being linear in nature, so you give to the poor in your family, immediate family first, and then in your extended family, then in your neighbors, then the ones that are further, and et cetera, in your village and the next village, and so on. So the fifth pillar, I think we reached 5, is the Hajj. Hajj is the once-in-a-lifetime pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and there are rituals that are performed, roughly about a week worth of rituals, and the last day of it is the culmination of, it culminates in the feast of sacrifice, where Muslims that are at the pilgrimage would sacrifice an animal of a sort to commemorate Abraham being asked by God to sacrifice his son, and God replacing that with his son with Aram and being sacrificed. So it goes back to those days, but it is on the last day they will do that. That meat, of course, is consumed by, a third of it is consumed by the one who does the killing, and then the rest is given to the poor people. So those are, in a quick summation, are the 5 pillars that Islam rests on.
Thank you.
Welcome.
The Quran has many surahs.
114.
114. Now, we'd like to hear what your favorite surah is.
It's tough choosing from 114, but you know, I'm sentimental about that. So the story of Joseph, probably, the surah named after the prophet Joseph, in Arabic, Yusuf, which tells his story, is a dear and near to my heart simply because I inherited that from my mother. That was her favorite. And I could see the contentment on her face when she was reading it. She loved reading it over and over again. And of course it tells of, you know, perseverance, of sacrifice, of forgiveness. There's much to be learned from that surah. So it's not just a little story about Joseph being sold by his brothers and going to Egypt, and his dream telling and the rest of that. I mean, it is definitely a fun story to read, but there are many lessons in that surah about how God rewards us when we persevere and be patient and forgive each other, and how God and destiny, through God's work, has a part in our daily lives. Joseph ends up going to jail for being accused of something he didn't do, and you know, when I, in my young age, I was thinking that's really unfair. Why would God let, you know, Joseph, his beloved, go to jail? You know, but it's part of the lesson of learning how we can sometimes be tried by things that have nothing to do with us necessarily, but it's part of the lesson that we're being taught. So that's one. You know, and a few others. Al Imran is another one that tells about the 12 tribes of Israel. There's much about that. That's also a very one that I enjoy very much. But yeah, it's really hard to choose.
Okay.
Yeah.
How can we encourage hope for Muslim Americans within the American culture?
That's a really intriguing question, because nowadays with immigrants being marginalized and you know, from what is happening in Arizona to some of the legislations that have been introduced that reek of anti-immigrant tones to them, especially after going through recessionary times where it is not unusual for us to be scapegoating and looking for somebody else to blame our economic woes on. Muslims, especially since 2001, have come under a microscope. And of course, people oftentimes can't separate their emotions from their intellectual thinking. So reasonable thoughts are not always brought to the table. And there have been many instances where, of course, Muslims have been judged wholesale and with a wide brush, and unfairly being associated with terrorists, etc., etc. Right after 2001, hate crimes against Muslims and Arabs, and those that look like them, spiked by 1,600%. So you see that really does not indicate that people were thinking with their right mind. Obviously, they were knee-jerk reactions to what happened in 2001, and some of it is understandable. We are not creatures that just use our logical mind to guide us throughout life. So for people to do that, it's some of it is understanding, but for it to persist in years after, to where there are what I would call right-wing groups who are just anti-Muslims, and Islamophobia is alive and well, thanks to those folks that when a crime is committed by somebody of the Muslim faith, that gets pointed out. His religion is pointed out as if every person who is Muslim represents the Muslim faith. Yet when somebody who is Christian kills doctors at an abortion clinic, his faith is not mentioned at all. Or when other crimes are committed by people that belong to a certain faith, that one is not mentioned one bit. But it seems like with this Islamophobic atmosphere, it seems much of that is happening, and I hope that does change. People need to be judged for their actions, not for where they're from or what side of the tracks they were born. That's unfair.
You're known in our community as a individual who promotes interfaith dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about your hopes for interfaith dialogue along the lines of encouraging greater understanding?
I do believe that it's really hard for us to live in a global village, as especially events of as recently as this week, where we're worried about nuclear fallout from Japanese nuclear reactors. So I think some of us are starting to realize that it is a small place, and what happens in Japan could affect the West Coast or beyond, and we can't just think as individuals. It is it's a community of nations, and if the community has a good chance of surviving, it needs to communicate. And stiff-arming each other is not what I would call an encouraged method of communication. And ignorance and stereotyping and painting with white brushes does not do the trick either. You really have to buckle down and get to know your neighbor. You have to ask questions. You have to discriminate between a criminal and attributing that to the religious beliefs. Yeah, there are some Muslims who are criminal, there are some Christians who are criminal, there are criminals of many faiths. But that does not make that faith a faith of criminals. It just so happened that somebody interprets a philosophy to fit to suit their own perspectives, and to guide them through whatever agenda they may have. Because obviously there are 1.3 billion Muslims in the world, and the greatest majority of them are God-fearing, law-abiding, decent, loving people. And to be judged by the weakest link by a few thousand terrorists, it's still not fair because they're insignificant statistically speaking compared to the greatest majority who are totally good folks. So I don't see a substitute for interfaith dialogue. We cannot leave it to politicians or to academics or to just general folks. The clergy needs to be involved. So the faith leaders need to chip in to do their part. So I think religions can be part of the problem, and they also can be part of the solution. I look forward to seeing people use them as part of the solution of human understanding, because at the end of the day, we all were created by the same God. I think all the religions agree on that. I'm sure some segments of some religions would think that there's, that they may be created by a God and the others by a lesser God. But I think the majority of people in the world that profess to have faith, they do believe that God is the only creator. And since we are creatures, somebody created us. And if we are worth God's time, maybe we should be worth each other's time. Yeah.
If you could now just reflect for a moment or two on the course we've just taught here at the University of Oregon on spirituality and human services and the role that you played. If you could just, talk about that for a couple minutes, we'd really appreciate it.
Well, I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Q&A a lot. It showed me what the students had on their minds, what questions were floating around in their mind that I had felt that I made myself accessible enough as a person to where they overcame their whatever inhibitions maybe of thinking maybe that's not a good question, maybe that I should think it through, and it opened up the opportunity for them to ask what's on their minds. And I think breaking up into that small groups and discussing a couple of those topics that were brought to them by me, such as how would you use your knowledge of this course as a tool for the work you're about to embark on doing in your future. And I really think that that was a good brain teaser for them, and I also think that they gained by having a topic such big and overwhelming topic as Islam being reduced to one person standing in front of them discussing very human aspects of the religion, not the philosophical, not the ones that seem so ethereal and so far out somewhere, but the day-to-day basis, how a Muslim prays, how they wash, how they treat each other, how they treat their neighbors, how they treat the stranger amongst them, the orphans. So it brought it to life skills and life sets of what Muslims do, routines. So it humanized it to where they can actually touch it and feel it a friendly form of talking about something that, especially in this country, is seen as almost a taboo. Oh, Muslims, let's just stay away from them. So I really think that they saw a real human person who practices their religion, who is not coming from a theologian perspective. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about philosophies of Islam versus other philosophies, etc., etc. So it wasn't so academic. It was but it was the knowledge that they were looking for. You could tell, and especially from the evaluation they sent me in the form of a card where they were heaping praises on. I felt a bit bashful, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It felt like a real honest exchange of people who are trying to learn, and I was dispensing information in proportion to where they were at in their knowledge. So neither one was ahead of the other or behind the other. I thought it was a nice journey together.
We certainly enjoyed your presence and your ideas. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope to have another chance to do this again.
Me too, me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.